Try not to humiliate us tonight, my sister whispered through a smile, the kind that cuts without showing teeth. Stand where the flowers can hide you. There it was, family love distilled into a bruise you can't point at. I felt the music press against my ribs, the clink of glasses like tiny hammers, the vows still unspoken hovering over our table like soft, expensive ghosts. Halls of approval. Rooms of performance. I'd learned to breathe where oxygen was rationed. Hi everyone, my name is Mira, the quiet one in the photos, the daughter who keeps her shoulders low so other people's crowns don't slip. I learned early that silence buys a cheaper peace, that even joy must curtsy before it's allowed to sit. Yet tonight, under the chandeliers, I thought, some doors must be closed from the inside. The pianist laced the air with a polite love song. My fiancé laughed with his friends. My mother adjusted the napkins as if survival depended on crisp folds. And my father moved like a ceremony all by himself. Cufflinks glinting. Tie obedient. Eyes that had memorized where I flinch. He approached with 2 flutes of champagne balanced like blessings. I saw it because I was looking. The smallest tilt of his wrist, the brief, guilty shelter of his shoulder, the whisper of powder like first snow falling into gold. The bubbles swallowed it whole. His face lifted, a cathedral restored to calm. For the bride, he said. Time greedy took more of me. It took my childhood summers, those sticky mango days when he lifted me onto his shoulders and called me captain. It took the nights he taught me to measure love by how much silence I could carry. And now it wanted this, the soft future in my throat. He held the flute toward me. His ring clicked against the crystal. Click, like a door locking. Something inside me didn't move but everything else did. My hand steady. My mouth smiling. My sister still posed for the world that adored her. I felt the room applaud without clapping the way rooms do when the script goes right. Father's eyes, steady measuring. Mine, mirroring back oceans I'd never shown. Switch. I breathed, light as confetti. I want you to have the first toast. For luck. I slipped my untouched glass into his other hand, turned, and offered the tainted gold to my sister with that practiced, grateful smile she hates. He took it like a prize. The stem trembled only once. The chandelier made prisms on her cheek. I could hear my pulse in the glass, hear the stairs of my life creak under the weight of this moment. The rim met her lip. The room leaned in. And my father, for the first time in years, forgot how to breathe. The sound of her swallow was louder to me than the band's trumpet. My sister laughed, tilting her head back, champagne catching the light like liquid fire as it slid past her lips. The room clapped for a toast they didn't hear, while my own ears held only silence. Sharp, burning silence. My father's hand twitched. Just once. He lowered his glass without drinking, jaw stiff, his eyes latching onto me as though searching for a crack. But I didn't give him one. I smiled, steady, the kind of smile brides practice in mirrors when no one knows the storm inside. Inside my chest, the air turned jagged. Did she notice? Did she feel it burning yet? Seconds stretched long as years. My sister brushed a strand of hair from her face, oblivious. She even winked at one of my cousins across the table, basking in the glow of being handed a flute meant for me. She loved moments like that, stolen attention, unearned applause. My father leaned closer, his whisper as cold as the silver in his cufflinks. What did you do? I tilted my head slightly like a daughter waiting for praise. Exactly what you taught me, I murmured, voice low, sweet. Never waste an opportunity. The band shifted songs. Guests swirled into laughter, unaware of the thin thread tightening between us. My mother waved at a server fussing about appetizers. My fiancé's arm curled around my chair, protective in public but distant in truth. I wanted to lean into him, to whisper what I'd seen, what I'd done, but I stayed quiet. Some truths aren't whispered into borrowed hearts. My father straightened, smile plastered back onto his face like a mask that had been used too many times. He raised his glass high. To family, he declared. His voice carried smooth as velvet, but I felt the tremor hidden beneath. To family, the crowd echoed, glasses colliding, joy ringing hollow in my ears. I watched my sister, watched her throat tighten as though the champagne had grown heavier on the way down. She coughed once, brushed it off, then reached for another canopy. My father's knuckles whitened around the stem of his glass. I had shifted the script. I had broken the rhythm of his power. And in that fracture I found something I'd never tasted before. Not champagne, not victory, but possibility. As the crowd cheered, I looked him dead in the eyes and thought, if betrayal runs in blood, so does justice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the silence between us. My sister's laugh rang across the hall, careless, sharp. She had no idea that with each sip she was sipping the secret my father had poured. I should have felt guilt, but what I felt was sharper, cleaner. Like cutting free from ropes I'd worn for too long. My father didn't blink. He stayed seated, stone carved into a suit, eyes locked on her as though sheer will could undo what had already begun. I wondered if he tasted the fear gathering under his tongue, if he knew how visible his mask had become to me. For years I had memorized that mask. Tonight it was slipping. "Mira," my fiancé whispered, leaning in. "You look pale. Are you okay?" His voice was soft, but my mind was louder. Should I tell him? Should I expose everything right there in front of crystal and cameras and chandeliers? Or should I hold the silence, let it ripen into something heavier, undeniable? I forced a small nod. "Just nerves," I said. "Brides are allowed that. Nobody questions it." Meanwhile, my sister brushed invisible crumbs from her dress, oblivious. My mother finally noticed her cough and fussed with a napkin, but the moment passed. She smiled again, glass still in hand. She didn't see my father's jaw tighten. She didn't hear the tremor hiding in his carefully measured laugh. The weight of what I'd done pressed on me, but not like guilt. More like a door creaking open to air I'd never breathed before. My whole life I had been the quiet shadow. Tonight I had stepped into the light, by simply letting my father's own hand write the scene. And as the guests drifted toward the dance floor, as music swelled to cover secrets, I leaned into my father's ear with a smile the world thought was joy. "You tried to choose my ending," I whispered. "But now you'll have to live with hers." His glass trembled. He said nothing. But his silence was louder than any toast. The music swelled, violins chasing laughter across the ballroom. Guests spun in circles of silk and polished shoes. From the outside it was perfect. A portrait of wealth and love painted for society's eyes. But at the head table our world was fracturing. My sister dabbed her lips with a napkin, another small cough escaping her throat. She waved it away with a flick of her wrist, ever the star of her own show. No one noticed the tightness around her eyes. No one except me and him. Father leaned back in his chair, shoulders drawn, hands folded too carefully on the tablecloth. He looked like a man rehearsing calm, but I knew that posture. I'd seen it after arguments with mother, after bruises I hid under sleeves. He was calculating, rewriting, trying to bend this moment back under his control. I let him stew. For once I didn't rush to fill the silence. My whole life I had been his mirror, shrinking or smiling to keep his storms contained. But tonight the storm belonged to him. "Mira," he muttered under his breath, face frozen in a smile for the guests. "You don't understand what you've done." I tilted my head, eyes locked on his. "I understand perfectly. You wanted me quiet, gone, erased. Instead she drank your gift." His lips barely moved. "Do you think this saves you? Do you think this makes you safe?" I leaned closer, letting the chandelier light flicker across my smile. "No," I said softly. "It makes me seen." My fiancé tapped my shoulder, then pulling me to the dance floor. Cameras flashed. My dress swirled as he led me through steps rehearsed for weeks. But my gaze kept sliding back to the table, where my father sat trapped in his own undoing. Every twirl, every dip, every laugh I forced out felt like salt pressed into a wound he couldn't hide. And when the song ended, applause echoing, I saw it, the smallest crack in his armor. His hand trembled as he reached for water. His daughter, his favorite, had just become the vessel of his secret. And for once I wasn't the fragile one. The evening blurred into a carousel of speeches, laughter, and glittering photographs. But beneath the shine, tension thickened, like smoke curling through the chandeliers. My sister's cheeks were flushed, her laughter too loud, too desperate. She excused herself twice to the restroom, brushing it off with a wave when anyone asked. I watched my father's eyes track her every step, a hunter who'd misfired his shot. His smile was steady, but his fingers tapped against the tablecloth, a rhythm only I could hear, sharp, uneven, panicked. Mother finally leaned toward him. "Is she all right?" she whispered, concern knitting her brow. "She's fine," he replied too quickly, the words snapping like dry twigs. It's nothing. But I saw the sweat building at his hairline. The way his chest barely moved with each breath. He was unraveling thread by thread, in a room full of people too blind to see the tapestry burning. When my sister returned, she raised her glass again, determined to reclaim the spotlight. To Mira, she shouted, her voice strained but proud. To my little sister who finally found someone willing to love her. The crowd cheered. I smiled through the sting of her words. It wasn't new, her need to reduce me to a shadow while she shone brighter. But tonight her words rang hollow. She had drunk what was meant to erase me. And my father knew it. I lifted my own glass, meeting her eyes with steady calm. To family, I said softly. My gaze slid to my father's. And to truth. He flinched. Just slightly. But I caught it. The room toasted again, oblivious. Laughter rose, champagne fizzed, cameras flashed. Yet in the corner of my vision, I saw my father grip the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. The stage he had built, the play he had written, was tilting. And for the first time he didn't know his lines. And I was no longer reading from his script. By the time the cake was wheeled out, my sister's glow had dulled. She laughed too late at jokes, her steps heavier as though the floor itself resisted her. Guests whispered, chalking it up to too much champagne. Only I knew the truth. What laced her veins had never been meant for her. Father rose quickly, intercepting her before anyone else could. He gripped her arm with a little too much force, his smile wide enough to hide the panic in his eyes. She's fine, he told the crowd. Just tired. You know how parties are. But I caught the way his thumb trembled against her sleeve. I caught the way he avoided looking at me. I moved closer, my dress brushing against the marble floor, the cameras still flashing. Do you need help, Father? I asked, my voice dipped in sweetness but sharpened underneath. His eyes snapped to mine. For the briefest moment the world shrank to the two of us, his mask my smile. A war fought in silence while violins played in the background. No, he bit out. Stay out of this. But it was too late. My fiancé had noticed now. Mother too. She reached for my sister, alarm plain in her voice. She's burning up, she murmured. The ballroom buzz shifted. Concern threaded through laughter, guests exchanging glances. My father barked an order to a server for water, but his control was slipping like sand between his fingers. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. This is your doing, I whispered. And the longer you hide it, the louder it will become. He froze. The color drained from his face, not from guilt, he didn't know how to feel that, but from exposure. The curtain was tearing and he couldn't stitch it fast enough. My sister swayed, nearly collapsing against Mother. Gasps echoed. A spotlight shifted, uninvited. And suddenly the engagement party was no longer about me or even about love. It had become a stage for truth. And my father was caught in the center, stripped of his script. The hall that once pulsed with laughter now held a different rhythm. Uneasy murmurs, the scrape of chairs as guests shifted, the sharp hiss of whispers circling like vultures. My sister slumped against Mother's shoulder, her skin damp, her breathing shallow. A server rushed forward with water, another with concern. But all eyes eventually turned to the man at the center, my father. His voice cracked as he tried to control the scene. It's nothing. She'll be fine. Just the champagne. No one answered. The silence grew heavy, suspicious. And I, finally, after years of swallowing words, let mine out. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against marble like a drum roll. Are you sure it was just champagne, Father? My tone was light, innocent even, but every syllable was a blade. The crowd stilled. He froze, a deer pinned under chandeliers. What are you implying? I'm not implying, I said softly, eyes locked on his. I saw. Gasps rippled. Cameras, which had been turned toward me and my fiancé minutes earlier, now turned toward him. The perfect patriarch. The generous host. The man whose hand had trembled as he tipped white powder into a glass. Mother's eyes darted between us, confusion carving deep lines into her face. My fiancé's arm tightened around me, unsure but protective. My sister coughed again, weaker this time, and suddenly the whispers became questions. Louder, sharper, demanding. What's wrong with her? Is she okay? What did he do? Father's mask cracked. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound like a gavel. Enough. But his voice betrayed him. It wavered, desperate, naked. I stood tall, every ounce of me trembling but unbroken. You wanted me silent, I whispered, though the microphone on the bandstand carried my words further than I intended. But silence ends tonight. The guest stared. My sister moaned softly, head bowing. And in that suspended moment, with music halted and lies unraveling, I knew part 8 would not just be about revenge. It would be about freedom. The ballroom had become a trial, and the jury was everyone who had once clapped for him. Their eyes pierced through the suit, the polished shoes, the practiced charm. He tried to speak, but the words snagged in his throat. My sister groaned again, and 2 guests rushed to steady her. Mother turned to him, her face pale. "What did you do?" she whispered, voice trembling with a kind of disbelief that shakes the ground beneath a marriage. He stammered. It wasn't supposed to." Then he stopped, realizing too late the confession spilling from his lips. The room erupted in shock. Questions overlapped, voices rose, a sea of disbelief crashing against him. Me. I stood still, calm, as though I'd been preparing for this moment my whole life. I raised my glass, untouched, glimmering under the lights. "This was meant for me," I said softly, yet every corner of the room heard it. "But he chose the wrong daughter to erase." Gasps echoed. Someone called for an ambulance. Another whispered the word poison. The chandeliers sparkled above us, mocking the collapse of the man who once believed he was untouchable. My sister was rushed out on a stretcher, still breathing, her fate uncertain. But in that moment the damage was already done, not to her body but to his empire. His reputation, his mask, his throne, shattered in a single evening. Police arrived before the cake was cut. They didn't come for me. They came for him. Cameras flashed, not with celebration but with scandal. And I, the forgotten daughter, the quiet shadow, was no longer invisible. As they led him away, his eyes searched mine, begging for mercy I could not give. I only offered the smile he had taught me to wear, the kind that hides storms. And when silence finally returned to the hall, I felt something I had never known before. Peace. Not the peace of obedience. Not the peace of fear. But the peace of truth finally spoken. And with that my story closed, not in rage but in quiet triumph.